Hi, everyone. This is our final cognitive development chapter. Now we're going to focus on adolescence. And of course, if we're talking about cognitive development, that means that we will talk about Piaget. So let's do a little review of where we've come in terms of Piaget's theory. So we started with understanding that children think in a sensory motor way when they are newborns up to about 2 or 3 years old. And their ability to think is primarily through their senses and their motor capabilities. Well, then they get a little bit older, they're maybe preschool age, and you want to think about their thinking being still limited at that age. They're egocentric, and again, they have a hard time fully understanding others' perspectives. Then, at about elementary age, children are concrete thinkers. They're more logical, they're more flexible, but they still need concrete evidence in front of them to really understand concepts. And now, children or anyone older than the age of 11 are formal operational thinkers. So that means that you now have the capacity for abstract thinking, scientific thinking. You no longer need something right in front of you to understand it. You can take the evidence given to you and come up with a solution. At this thinking stage, you are able to do more internal reflection. And that's where, if you think about college, a lot of it is reflecting on your experiences or reflecting on research. And this age, adolescents start to understand that there's not only one approach or one possibility. Sometimes there's infinite. And they'll get deeper into, what is the meaning behind things that maybe they've believed their whole lives. So, do we all reach this formal operational stage of thinking? Well, no. They think that, again, if you're able to be abstract or to think systematically, it's because you've had a lot of guidance and a lot of practice. So, without that, some people may not display those formal operations. And again, it's many times taught in schooling. So, if maybe someone did not continue their schooling or were not too involved in their schooling, they may not have a lot of practice or experience with that formal operational way of thinking. Okay, so now I want to challenge you to try to do this problem on your own before you get to the answer slide. But four good friends, Anne, Billy, Carla, and David, A, B, C, and D, want to know how many combinations of themselves can go to a school dance. They could all go, that's one way. Uh, Anne and Billy could go, that's another way. And Billy and Carla could go, that's another way, right? So each possibility must include at least one of the teens. So, how many total possibilities are there? And again, this is a formal operational way of thinking. We may not always get to the right solution, but I'm interested in thinking about how did we process this? How did we approach this mathematical problem? So, in terms of strategies, did you draw a picture? Did you do some kind of mathematical equation? Did you make a graph or act it out? Did you actually use handheld objects to find the solution? Did you look for patterns? Did you work backwards? So, again, just curious in terms of how did you approach that problem? Now, if you haven't solved it yet, pause it here because the next slide is the solution. 15. There are 15 possibilities. The four of them could go alone. There are six combinations of two, four combinations of three, and one combination of all four going, which is a total of 15. So hypothetico-deductive reasoning is very similar to something you might have seen growing up, where you start with a theory, you come up with hypotheses, you test those hypotheses, and you get your solution. Well, I'm going to skip forward quickly to show you. Yes, you've seen that before, and even as early as elementary school, right? The scientific method. Ask a question, come up with hypotheses, conduct your experiment, analyze the results, and make a conclusion. So, with young children, they are concrete, right? So they have to begin with reality and then proceed to what is possible. Here, we can begin with any possibility, right? Because we are going to do the necessary steps to find out if it really is a possibility in terms of reality. So let's look at how Piaget approached this. He did a pendulum problem, and he wanted to know, how long the string would keep um, swaying. And what variable influenced that sway? Was it the length? Was it the weight of the object? Was it how high you raised it? Or was it how forcibly you pushed it? So they would test each factor one at a time, separately, combined. Well, what they ended up finding out was really it was only the string length that made the difference. It wasn't the weight, it wasn't the pressure, it was how long the string was and how much tension it had to go back and forth. Another term that Piaget refers to is propositional thinking. We can evaluate what someone says, right, or reading something that someone provides us. And again, when we're young, we can only relate that to things that we've experienced before. But now, as formal operational thinkers, we should be able to come up with a solution. So here's another good time to think of this example before going to the next slide and coming up with your own solution. But let's say someone was asked the following propositional task and asked, is this true, false, or uncertain? Premise one or fact one, all animals are purple. That's a fact. Premise two, a frobe is purple. Therefore, can we conclude that a frobe is an animal? So is that true, false, or uncertain? So again, pause here if you don't want to know the solution yet. Well, the solution is uncertain. A frobe might be an animal, but it could also be a purple thing that's not an animal, right? We weren't given enough information to come up with a true or false statement. Instead, it's uncertain. And now let's look at a few terms in terms of adolescent egocentrism. We have imaginary audience, invincibility fable, and personal fable. So, imaginary audience is the teenage belief that everyone is looking at them, everyone's concerned about them, feeling like they're always on stage. So, they might be self conscious about having a blemish or a pimple, about their hairstyle, about their clothing, right? Feeling others could be looking at them and judging them, even though most people are kind of usually concerned about themselves. Invincibility fable is thinking they're invincible. They don't think death will occur unless it's meant to be. So they don't worry about typical issues like driving too fast or having unprotected sex or doing drugs, because when you remove that fear and believe you're invincible, it then removes the desire to control what happens, right? Because you kind of think that everything is already mapped out. And personal fable is very similar to invincibility. You think you're special and unique, and that won't happen to me. But you also develop this inflated opinion of your own importance. Others can't possibly understand what you're going through. It's only unique to you. And we all know that yes, timing changes and circumstance, but even parents have been through adolescence. Now, what do we gain in information processing at this age? We can be more selective in our attention. We are more strategic. our knowledge. We can go to, again, to strategies. What strategies do you use in terms of math? And our working memory is improving. So we have a lot to work with us at this age. It's whether or not we want to actually use it. And um, again, it takes work. So, school transitioning can help adolescents, I'm sorry, can hinder adolescents at this age because there's higher standards and typically less support. So, the more we transition, the more adolescents will have a difficult time. If you think about it, a lot of teens will transition from elementary to junior high and then junior high to high school. Well, what if their parents are also moving because of work and it's going to become more difficult. So we see that in terms of why a teen might be truant, well, even a well-adjusted teen might be truant or have issues, but typically if they have academic problems, mental health problems, and when they're combined is when they are again missing a lot of school. So, how do we help from dropping out? And again, offering remedial instruction, high quality job training, and help them out with the things that are going on in their lives, as well as encouraging them to be active in school if that's an option for them. So, how do we support high achievement? Again, through our parenting style, allowing the child to be part of the decision making, who your peers are will play a lot again into how you're supported. What school do you go to? Well, that plays into how you achieve. And even are you employed? A lot of teens are going to work as well as going to school. So they do recommend less than 15 hours per week. And especially if you're not college bound, the job can be a very good placement for you to work towards as you're getting through school. So, lastly, what are the factors that influence what we will choose as a career? Well, again, our personality, but also family influences. Maybe our teachers have influenced us. Maybe we feel there are gender stereotypes or we want to break them. And what access do we have to that information? Well, now you can get a lot of access online. So, there's three phases of vocational development. In early and middle childhood, we're many times in this fantasy period where we look at things that are familiar to us, that are glamorous. We want to be movie stars and maybe a princess. But then we hit a tentative period around early middle adolescence where we start to then see, okay, what am I interested in? And as we get towards the end of adolescence, start to think about what do I actually have the ability for? Then we hit that realistic period and we start to narrow our options. And again, we talk about identity, exploration, and commitment. In- Extremely important as we get into the next um, chapter. You'll hear those terms exploration and commitment. And then typically we start to focus on a category. So, you're more than welcome to learn more about yourself by going to this website where you can learn more about your interests, basic skills, work values, career, etc. And email me with any questions.